I want to talk about a museum that I visited recently, and it's in the Seminole War Guide, Seminole War Heritage Trail, Gadsden County, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. The Apalachicola Arsenal. Sorry, I have to get the share. Where's share screen? Okay, I'm all thumbs on this. Okay. Okay, Apalachicola Arsenal and the Powder Magazine Museum in Chattahoochee, Florida. A little bit of history behind this. I think is probably the Militia Act passed by Congress in 1798 established that the different states and territories would have a organized militia, and they would also have a supply depot or an arsenal. And so Florida during territorial days had the Apalachicola Arsenal. Originally, it was called the Mount Vernon Arsenal, and which created some confusion because there's a Mount Vernon Arsenal in Alabama, west of Mobile. So must have driven the mailman crazy, and that's kind of exactly what happened. Is that created a lot of confusion. So they renamed it the Apalachicola Arsenal, make it easier. I don't know why it was named Mount Vernon Arsenal. And it was started, I think, in 1832 and finished in 1838 and 1839. So there's actually a lot of Seminole War history in regards to the location, and had some history during the Civil War when the lone caretaker was just kind of minding his own business, and the Confederate forces showed up and took the arsenal from him. And that's not unusual. A lot of the forts and coastal forts and arsenals had just one caretaker, an officer or a sergeant, ordnance sergeant, and they would be responsible for it. If there was a war that started, uprising, then the local militia would come to the arsenal and kind of man the staff. And this is the building right here. This is the reconstructed powder magazine, or the Powder Magazine Museum of the Apalachicola Arsenal. It's in Chattahoochee, Florida. You go down Highway 90 and you'll see the state hospital. You'll have to go past the guard shack and they'll give you directions, because if you don't know where it is, you'll have trouble finding it. It's way in the back and you have to kind of snake around a few real bad roads there to get back here, but it's a beautiful building. I saw originally back in 2001, 2002, the building was just a shell of a former self, only the walls were standing up. And 10 years later, it was repurposed, renovated, and became this wonderful museum. Now, looking on the interior of the building, it actually has two walls. It has an outer wall and an inner wall, and we're going to see some of that in a minute. So if by chance the powder stored inside would explode, then it would be contained in the building. And it was also outside of the arsenal compound. The original arsenal had fort wall. Well, we'll see a picture of that. And this is a picture from about 1839 in the display in the museum of a building called the Shot Tower. And this is the regular compound of the arsenal. You can see a wall going around, and there's two buildings, the Shot Tower on the south side of the compound. And then on the left, you can see the part of the administration building. Well, we'll show in a minute. But this was probably the tallest building in Florida at the time, in the Florida territory. And what they would do at the top of the tower, they would melt bars of lead and it would drop it, or droplets of molten lead would go down the tower and into water at the bottom. They'd just drop one at a time, and it would be, I don't know, 69 caliber or whatever for the musket balls. And dropping those 5 or 6 stories would make it a perfectly spherical shot. And that's the science behind them. And there's also in the museum, starts with Native American displays, see a finger woven sash and a Seminole palmetto doll. Notice on the left-hand side, and I have video, but I decided not to use the video because there is a lot of background noise. That's a Seminole dress. There was a man who owned a fish gate or fish camp. His name was Jack Wingate, and this was a dress owned by his wife. And in fact, I know the people who actually made the dress there, who are in this area. And kind of local history, the fish camp was on Lake Seminole, of course. And here's a old dugout canoe remains in the museum. That's pretty cool. And going on to the Seminole War history, nearby we have what they call the Scott Battle or Scott Massacre. They just say Battle at the River in 1817, because people are, debating whether it's a battle or a massacre. But anyway, I've done videos on this before plenty of times. And this is a new display. It had about 3 or 4 PhDs looking over, make sure the information was what we know from the sources. It was kind of cool. In the bottom right-hand side is actual reprint of the document of the military report and all that. So that's kind of cool. That's local history. And one of the incidents that started the first Seminole War going hot and heavy. And here's a musket on loan from the state archives. It's like an 1816 Springfield, remains of one. And in the display case, there's some musket balls and the little lead pieces that hold the flint in the lock of the mechanism. And there's some other things in the museum of different times of history. This is a movie projector. After about 1876, the Arsenal was repurposed into the state hospital, and it's been the state hospital ever since, so like 145 years. And this kind of neat old movie projector. There's some displays on some of the things from the hospital, including this 5-seater latrine there, which is kind of hilarious there. But look on the wall behind it. That's the original brickwork of the Arsenal, and it's absolutely beautiful. Let me show you some more of that. And we're looking out the front door, but we're actually inside the inner part, the inner wall, and they rebuilt some beautiful wooden doors. That was originally part of the I guess the sally port of the inner sanctum of that. And we're in the inner gallery. This used now as the art gallery, but look at the brickwork and the arches of the building. And look at that. I think this is one of the most beautiful structures in the area that I've ever seen. It's like an old fortification with the casemates and the brickwork, the arches. And here's from the other hallway of the gallery. And this was all the powder magazine. And then the hospital, I think it became like this laundry or some facility. And then it was rebuilt about 2012, 2013 to what we have today. Right now in that space is this display on water. This is actually on loan from the Smithsonian. And I saw this same exhibit in Citrus County recently in the Courthouse Museum, but it fits really well in the archive or the Arsenal space. And here's another view of it. You'll see some tripods on the right-hand side with some boards, and that's some of the local people talking about the river and their adventures. One of the men says when he was a boy, he and his buddies, they decided to make a raft to float down the river like Tom Sawyer, and of course built it out of pine logs, and it broke apart when they got in the middle of the river. Funny stories like that. Also in the Arsenal area was the shot tower, which I mentioned earlier. This image that was made about 1839. You'll see at the left-hand side, there's the administration building. The shot tower was here in the museum. Here's an image from 1913 from the state Florida memory photo collection. Water tower on top of the shot tower. And it's and there's a similar building still remaining in Alabama at the original Alabama Arsenal. It's now the Searcy Hospital. It was abandoned by the state about 10 years ago, and it's falling apart. There's an effort to try to save these buildings. I don't know what's happened on that. I haven't heard anything for 2 years. I hope they're able to rescue that building. The Apalachicola Arsenal, the other surviving Seminole War buildings, when you come in the main gate, you'll pass by this right here, and this is going to be the administration building, which you saw part of in the sketch, and that is it today. It's used as the headquarters of the hospital, the administration building. It's just absolutely beautiful building with the gables. It looks like they enclosed in some of the porch area that used to wrap around the whole building. Here it is from the back side. And that's the back entrance. Wonderful building. And in fact, the brickwork in the basement is the original herringbone brickwork I saw at about 2001. Building next to it, that's the old, what they call the guardhouse. The soldiers who would come here, maybe Florida militia, would set up guard duty. And so that's where the soldiers doing the guard duty, the officer of the day, the guard mount, would be in this building. If it's cold out, they'd have a place to get in and get warm. And there's another building across the street. This is on the imprint of the original warehouse. I think this is a building that's constructed on the site of the original one. It looks very old. I thought it was the original building, but according to Dale Cox's information, it's a later building built on the imprint of the original warehouse in the original compound of the Arsenal. And the Arsenal is on the Chattahoochee, or just like a half a mile from the Chattahoochee River, or the Apalachicola River, I should say. This is Chattahoochee Landing on the Apalachicola River in Chattahoochee, Florida. I get the two mixed up because they're almost interchangeable. You see the dam up there, that's the Woodruff Dam of Lake Seminole, less than a mile away. And that's the confluence of the Chattahoochee and Flint River, where they become the Apalachicola River. This is one reason why the Arsenal was built at this location, because the supplies could be brought up right up the river into middle Florida. The roads were precarious and kind of vague back then, so the river traffic was more reliable. And anyway, if you want to visit the Apalachicola Arsenal, it's all run by volunteers. Right now, it's open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And I hope that's correct. They're on Facebook, so you can look up the hours on Facebook and the current exhibits. The Apalachicola Arsenal, Chattahoochee Main Street. It's definitely worth the trail off the main track. Go down Highway 90, one of the most scenic highways in Florida, I believe, because you go through all the old towns, see all the old buildings. It's very pretty. It's a great alternative to the monotonous I-10 through the Florida Panhandle. And I hope you enjoyed this and visit the Arsenal soon.